Greetings, learners. Prepare to embark on a deep dive into a foundational text that reshaped our understanding of logic, meaning, and knowledge itself. We're talking about Edmund Husserl's monumental logical investigations.
It really is a monumental work, not just describing philosophy, but really doing it, Opening up new ways to think about thinking.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. Forget everything you thought you knew about philosophy of logic being dry. This isn't a systematic exposition, as Husserl himself insisted.
No, definitely not. It's more like a series of, analytical inquiries, as he put it.
A thrilling journey into the very fabric of how we think and know. Like a philosophical detective, maybe, examining every clue, every assumption.
That's a great way to put it. Meticulously revealing the hidden structures beneath our everyday understanding. The energy is quite remarkable.
Today, our mission is to peel back the layers of this challenging but honestly profoundly rewarding text.
It is challenging, no doubt about that.
We want to extract its most vital ideas and see how Husserl challenged prevailing notions, particularly his fierce critique of psychologism.
Which was a huge deal at the time.
We'll explore how he clarifies the essential nature of logical knowledge and lays the groundwork for a revolutionary approach to understanding consciousness, really setting the stage for phenomenology.
Indeed. And what's truly fascinating here is that Husserl's goal wasn't just to describe logic as some kind of abstract system.
Right.
He wanted to establish its phenomenological founding. He wanted to understand where our ideas of truth and knowledge really originate.
Not just intellectually.
No, not just intellectually, but from the deepest experiential foundations, the actual lived processes of consciousness that, give rise to meaning in our logical thinking, tracing it back to the source.
So going deeper than just the rules.
Much deeper. This deep dive will show how Husserl meticulously distinguished between the real and the ideal, and why that distinction is absolutely crucial for any coherent theory of knowledge. It's about clarifying the fundamental essence of a thing,
An event, a cause, an effect.
Exactly, and its profound affinity with the essence of thought, which enables it to be thought, to be knowable, to be capable of being meant by us.
We'll be navigating some pretty intricate philosophical discussions then. Semiotics, semantics.
The very nature of conscious acts. Get ready for some serious insights, maybe some aha moments that might just change how you think about meaning itself.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The core of Husserl's project, establishing pure logic as a rigorous science. His logical investigations is often seen as pivotal, especially for its powerful assault on psychologism.
A full frontal assault, really.
So this term, psychologism, it gets thrown around a lot in philosophy. Yeah. What exactly is it, and why was Husserl so determined to dismantle it? What was the big threat?
Well, psychologism, at its heart, attempts to explain concepts and logical principles by referring purely to inner mental operations or psychological matters of fact.
So grounding logic in how our minds actually work.
Precisely. Think of it as reducing the timeless, universal laws of logic to the natural laws of how our minds happen to function, biases, associations, limitations, and all.
Instead of how we should think.
Exactly. Rather than how we should think or what is objectively true. It basically sees logic as just a descriptive branch of empirical psychology.
And Husserl wasn't having any of that.
Not at all. He found this perspective fundamentally flawed. He dedicated the entire first volume, the Prolegomena, to pure logic, to just meticulously dissecting and refuting it.
Wow, a whole volume.
His core argument was simple yet profound. Logical laws are not psychological laws, full stop. Meaning no logical law implies a matter of fact or the existence of presentations or judgments or other phenomena of knowledge.
Could you give an example?
Sure. Take the law of non-contradiction. It says two contradictory propositions can't both be true simultaneously. Now, this isn't a statement about whether a human brain can or cannot simultaneously believe two contradictions. People do that all the time, right? It's a statement about the objective, ideal incompatibility of the propositions themselves. It's independent of any mind thinking about them. It's a logical impossibility, not a psychological limitation.
Okay, I see the distinction. And why is that so critical?
It's absolutely critical because if logical truths were merely psychological, they would be, as he put it, empirical but not inductive laws. Vague, probable, contingent on human mental life.
So, not certain. Not universal.
Exactly. Our logical insights would just be descriptions of how our minds tend to operate, maybe changeable, maybe refutable by new psychological findings. They wouldn't be timeless, objective truths.
It's like saying 2 + 2 = 4 is just how our brains happen to calculate right now.
Precisely. Imagine if mathematical principles were just descriptions of how ancient abacus users moved beads. They'd lose their a priori guarantee, their wholly exact, purely conceptual character. Logic would become just a collection of observations about cognitive habits, not a system of necessary truths.
That's a really powerful point about the stakes here.
Yeah.
It clarifies why this wasn't just some academic squabble.
The stakes were incredibly high.
It's like trying to understand the rules of chess just by watching how different players actually move the pieces. You might learn common strategies, maybe common mistakes.
Right, you'd learn about the psychology of chess playing.
But you wouldn't grasp the invariant, abstract rules that define chess itself, the rules that make the game coherent, regardless of who's playing or how well.
Exactly. And Husserl connected the dots. He argued that psychologism ultimately leads to a form of skeptical relativism.
How so?
Well, if logical principles are just descriptions of human mental processes, then they're contingent. Our ways of thinking could change. Maybe different beings could have different logics.
So undermining objective validity.
Totally undermining the objective validity of knowledge itself. If logic is just about how we happen to think, how can we claim universal, absolute truth? It opens the door saying, well, that's true for you, but not for me, about the very structure of reasoning.
Which sounds like chaos.
It reduces truth to subjective perspective or cultural convention. Husserl saw that as an intellectual disaster for science and philosophy.
Okay, so if logic isn't psychology, what is it then? Husserl calls it a normative discipline, but one rooted in theory. What does that mean for how we understand science? It sounds foundational, but different from empirical science.
Yes, a normative discipline. According to Husserl, it establishes general propositions in which, with an eye to a normative standard, an idea, or highest goal, certain features are mentioned whose possession guarantees conformity to that standard.
So it sets a standard, a goal.
Right. It's not just describing what is, but defining what should be to achieve a certain goal. And for logic, that highest goal is genuine, valid science and truth itself.
And how does that relate to science as a whole?
The key insight is that sciences are creations of the spirit, which are directed to a certain end, and which are for that reason to be judged in accordance with that end. Logic seeks to understand what pertains to genuine, valid science as such, what constitutes the idea of science.
So it provides the criteria for good science.
Exactly. Rigor, clarity, truth. It's distinct from, say, descriptive psychology, which just observes mental phenomena without prescribing how they should be.
But there's a twist, isn't there, about theory?
Yes, the crucial twist. Husserl argues that every normative and likewise every practical discipline rests on one or more theoretical disciplines. Its rules, its shoulds, must have a theoretical content separable from the notion of normativity.
Meaning the norms aren't arbitrary, they're based on something objective.
Precisely. This theoretical content describes the actual relationships and essences upon which the norms are built. Without that theoretical grounding, the norms would just be commands without reason.
Can you give us a concrete example to make that clearer, maybe outside philosophy?
Sure. Consider a normative proposition like a soldier should be brave. It sounds like a command, right? But it implies an underlying theoretical proposition. Only a brave soldier is a good soldier. And good here refers to some constitutive content like effective performance or fulfilling the soldier's role.
So the should is based on an is.
Exactly. The should of the norm is built upon an is, a statement about what objectively constitutes a good soldier. Or think about art. A drama should not break up into episodes. This implies that a drama which breaks up into episodes is not a good drama, not a true work of art. The evaluation rests on an objective characterization of what a good drama is.
So logic reveals the theoretical structures that make correct thought possible.
Yes. It doesn't just tell us how to think correctly, it shows the underlying structures.
This perspective on logic as theoretical and ideal brings us to Kant. Kant also had a formal logic preceding science, right? But Husserl thought Kant hadn't quite nailed it. What was missing?
Husserl saw Kant's transcendental logic as groundbreaking, absolutely. But he felt it hadn't fully grasped the ideal character of pure logic. Kant, Husserl thought, sometimes conflated logic with a science of the rules of the understanding in general.
Still too tied to the human mind.
A little bit, yes. Still carried a hint of the psychological, focusing on the human faculty of understanding. Pure logic, for Husserl, aims at this ideal side of science in respect of its form. Its laws are entirely ideal,
Independent of how we think.
independent of the peculiar material of specific sciences, and independent of the specific workings of a human mind. They're about what relates to truths and theoretical combinations of truths as such.
And how do these ideal laws become practical rules?
They acquire methodological significance because immediate justification is provided by proofs whose norms are merely normative transformations of the ideal laws. The rules for correct reasoning, the shoulds of logic, are just different ways of expressing these underlying ideal laws.
So they provide the framework.
The framework for valid arguments and coherent theories, not the content. The laws of logic, like non-contradiction, govern all truth, and since they are truths, they govern themselves. They set the a priori conditions for any theory.
A level of pure formal ideality Kant didn't quite reach.
That's what Husserl believed. He wanted to ground logic not just in our capacities for understanding, but in the objective, ideal structures that make understanding truth possible in the first place.
Okay, so if logic is theoretical and ideal, concerned with these pure forms and conditions, what about more practical approaches, like the economy of thought principle from Mach and Avenarius? That sounds appealingly efficient.
Ah, yes, the principle of the economy of thought. It suggests thinking, especially scientific thinking, adapts to its environment. It performs necessary acts rapidly, minimal energy expenditure.
Like a cognitive shortcut.
Exactly. It's a valuable teleological viewpoint, looking at purpose and function for understanding biological adaptation, even the anthropological grounds of varying methods of research. It sees thought as a tool that evolves for efficiency.
Can you give examples?
Sure. Think about algorithms in math. They save us as much genuine deductive mental work as possible by artificially arranged mechanical operations on sensible signs.
Right, like using a calculator instead of doing long division by hand.
Or how trained thinkers find proofs more easily. Types of proof get deeply engraved on his mind through experience, guiding thought more readily. It explains how our thinking becomes streamlined.
So it's like when I'm looking for my keys, my brain instantly checks the hook by the door, because that's usually where they are. An efficient learned behavior. Makes sense practically.
Exactly. Great example. But here's the crucial distinction Husserl makes.
Ah, the but.
While useful for practical epistemology and methodology, how we do science efficiently, he argues this principle not at all on pure epistemology, and especially not on the ideal laws of pure logic.
So it's useful for psychology, but not logic itself.
Right. It's valuable for understanding the biological and psychological aspects of cognition, but it doesn't touch the objective validity or ideal essence of logical principles. Evolution might explain why our brains find patterns efficiently.
But not why 2 + 2 = 4 is true.
Precisely. It cannot explain why the law of non-contradiction is true. That belongs to ideal logic, not empirical psychology.
So the deeper point is, founding logic on economy of thought just brings you back to psychologism.
That's exactly it. It ultimately reduces to attempts to found it on psychology, falling prey to the same errors. It confuses the factually, given how our minds operate efficiently, with the logically ideal, the timeless laws that determine what is true, regardless of our mental effort.
It's a confusion between the factually given and the logically ideal, as he put it.
Yes, the former being tacitly substituted for the latter. It might explain why we develop thinking shortcuts, but not why those shortcuts lead to objectively valid conclusions, or what validity even means. Ideal logic defines logical necessity, not psychological convenience. It governs what must be true.
Okay, that clarifies the critique. So having established logic as pure and theoretical, Husserl then turns to language, to the sign. Why does something seemingly simple like a word need such deep investigation?
Because Husserl saw that the term sign itself is deeply ambiguous in everyday use and even in philosophy. This ambiguity leads to a lot of confusion. So to be rigorous, he had to make a crucial distinction.
Which was?
Between an indication and an expression. This distinction is key to clarifying how language actually works and avoiding errors that plagued earlier accounts of meaning.
Okay, indication first. What's that?
An indication is where one thing points to another, or provides an empirical motive or ground for believing in something else. One fact points to another fact, an association.
Like smoke indicating fire.
Exactly. Or a brand is the sign of a slave, a flag the sign of a ship. Even hypothetically, Martian canals are signs of the existence of intelligent beings, or practical things, like a knot in a handkerchief as a memory aid.
So the key is one existing thing pointing to another existing thing.
Yes, the existence of the indicator motivates belief in the existence of the indicated. It points to a fact, an existence. It's a factual, contingent relationship.
And an expression. How is that different?
An expression is a meaningful sign. Now, expressions can function as indications like, my words might indicate my thoughts to you in conversation.
Right.
But their essence isn't intimation or pointing to a psychological state. The crucial test Husserl uses is solitary thought, or soliloquy.
Thinking to oneself.
Exactly. When we think to ourselves, forming words in our minds, we are in general content with imagined, rather than with actual words. The physical word's non-existence neither disturbs nor interests us, since it leaves the word's expressive function unaffected.
So the meaning works even without the physical sound or mark.
Precisely. If a word's main job was just to indicate an existence, physical or psychological, its non-existence in soliloquy would be a problem. But it isn't. The meaning remains intact.
That's a vital distinction. So the core of an expression isn't pointing, but meaning, intention, and meaning fulfillment.
Yes. We don't just register a sound or mark. We live in the enacting of its sense, its meaning. Our interest is centered on the object intended by that meaning.
It's about what the word means, not just what it points to.
Exactly. When we use language meaningfully, we're not primarily concerned with the physical word event or the psychological act of speaking, but with the ideal sense, the what is expressed. Husserl calls it a fused unity. We live solely in enacting its sense, focusing on the object intended and named by its means. This ideal content is what stays constant, even if the sign or act changes. It's the enduring what.
With this kind of rigorous analysis, I'm keen to hear how Husserl clarifies meaninglessness. He identifies multiple kinds, right, which often get mixed up.
He does. This is where his detailed conceptual analyses really shine, bringing much-needed clarity. He sorts out three main senses of meaninglessness that often get confused.
Okay, what's the first?
First, there's meaninglessness proper. This is where a combination of words generates no unified meaning at all, usually a syntactic or grammatical mess.
Like green is or red.
Exactly. The individual words have meaning, but strung together like that. No coherent thought emerges. It violates grammar, prevents meaning formation.
Okay, second type.
Second, objectlessness. Here, the expression does have meaning, a coherent sense, but no such object exists in reality.
The classic Golden Mountain.
Perfect example. You understand what Golden Mountain means. Golden and mountain are meaningful. Their combination is conceptually coherent. You can imagine it. But no such thing exists in reality. It has sense, a meaning intention, but no real-world referent. It's not meaningless like green is or...
Got it. And the third?
Third is senselessness. This refers to the a priori impossibility of a fulfilling sense. It applies to expressions infected with contradiction and obvious incompatibilities.
Round square.
The classic example again. You can say the words round square, but you cannot form a presentation of such contradictory material. It can't have a possible fulfillment or a unified intuitive illustration. It's absurd.
So this is deeper than just not existing.
Much deeper. It's a logical impossibility. The concept itself is inherently contradictory, incapable of coherent thought or instantiation. It cannot exist by its very definition.
That's incredibly helpful. It makes me wonder, could political slogans that are inherently contradictory, even if they sound good, fall into that senselessness category? Defying logical possibility, even if we can say the words.
That's a fascinating and provocative connection. Husserl himself wouldn't likely analyze specific slogans. His focus was the forms of meaning.
Right.
But his framework absolutely gives you the tools for that kind of analysis. If a slogan, rigorously unpacked, presents an inherent contradiction, making it conceptually impossible like a senseless notion, then yes, it would fail to convey a truly coherent possible meaning, regardless of emotional impact or rhetoric.
So the expression itself has a logical flaw.
Exactly. Not just lacking a referent, but an internal logical flaw. It forces us to ask, can we truly think what these words are trying to convey, or are we just reacting to sounds? A crucial question.
Given this meticulous method, how did Husserl tackle someone like J.S. Mill on connotation? Mill was hugely influential.
Oh yes, Mill was a giant of British empiricism. He tried to locate the essence of the meaning of names and their connotation, the attributes implied by a name. Human connotes rational, animal, etc.
Yeah.
Consequently, Mill treated non-connotative names proper names like Hans or attribute names like whiteness as meaningless in the proper sense, just labels. He famously compared a proper name to a robber's chalk mark, a mere indication pointing without inherent meaning.
And Husserl disagreed.
Sharply. His rebuttal cuts right back to his distinction between indication and expression. He argues Mill blurs the distinction between indicating and expressing.
How so?
A proper name, like Hans, is fundamentally an expression. It has an additional expressiveness to which the intimating function is merely auxiliary. When you say Hans, you're not just indicating a person's presence, you're naming an object, intending it as such.
And the chalk mark analogy breaks down.
Completely. Husserl points out that the object named by Hans need not be taken to exist at all for the name to be meaningful. The meaning of Hans doesn't depend on Hans existing right now, only its indicative function in a specific utterance might. We can talk meaningfully about Hamlet, right? Even though he doesn't exist. The deeper point is that the difference Mill sees is just between attributive and non-attributive names. It's a difference within the unitary genus expression and within the unitary genus meaning. It's about how names mean directly or via attributes, not whether they mean.
So proper names still have meaning and tension.
Absolutely. They direct us to an object regardless of existence or connotations. Confusing this with mere indication misses the essence of expression, which always carries an ideal sense.
That makes perfect sense. Now, language isn't always fixed, as we discussed. What about words whose meaning shifts with context? Husserl called them essentially occasional expressions, didn't he? Words we use constantly.
Yes, essentially occasional expressions. A broad category. Pronouns like I, you, demonstratives like this, that, temporal adverbs like now, spatial ones like here. Their meaning shifts with the occasion of utterance.
I means whoever's speaking, now means the present moment.
Exactly. The problem for formal logic is, while I generally means the person currently speaking, you cannot simply replace the word I with the person who is currently speaking in all contexts and preserve meaning.
Why not? Seems like it should work.
Because the act of speaking I is part of the meaning. It's an act of self-reference tied to the speaker that gets lost in the descriptive phrase. I carries an inherent self-referential quality, grounding the utterance in the speaker's lived experience. It's not just a proxy description.
Okay. So there are layers to the meaning.
Yes. Husserl says these terms have layered elements, an indicated meaning, context-dependent, who is speaking, when, where, and an indicative meaning, the act of pointing, the role, the current speaker, the present moment.
Did his view on these change?
It did, significantly. In the first edition, he initially saw indexicals, these occasional expressions, as non-normal or derivative forms of meaning, maybe replaceable in theory, if not practice.
But he revised that.
Yes. He later broadened this account in the sixth investigation. He came to recognize that indexicals stand at the basis of all empirical predication, and that every statement must be located in a context before its precise meaning can be understood.
Even seemingly fixed references.
Even things like the birth of Christ or the sun require a kind of deixis, a contextual anchoring. This means a purely formal system, totally context-free, can't fully capture empirical statements. He acknowledged a horizontal intentionality. Understanding requires attention to the context, that horizon of meaning.
That's a profound shift, acknowledging contextuality even in objective statements. What does this imply about a purely formal system, then? If I or now contributes to meaning, how can logic fully escape the subjective, even when aiming for ideal forms? It feels like a constant interplay.
It absolutely suggests a constant interplay. Husserl isn't saying logic becomes subjective, not at all.
Right.
Rather, he's showing how ideal logical forms are constituted within subjective experience. The meaning of I has an ideal component, the speaker, but its full concrete meaning needs the actual lived subjective act of utterance.
So the ideal is grasped through the subjective.
Exactly. Logic provides ideal structures, but our access to them is always situated within our conscious acts and their contexts. It's a bridge between subjective experience and objective logical truth. It shows the ideal isn't out there, totally separate, but grasped through consciousness. That tension is really at the heart of phenomenology.
Let's move to another challenging but crucial concept, universals. Husserl calls them species, distinguishing them sharply from individual instances. What's the ideal unity of the species? This goes right into a huge historical debate.
Right. The ideal unity of a meaning, or a universal, what Husserl calls a species, isn't grasped in an individual object. It's grasped in a peculiar consciousness, an act character of signification.
So not a physical thing, or just a mental image.
Neither. It's an ideal entity, a specific type or essence. It can be instantiated in many individuals, but it transcends those instances.
Can you give an example again?
Sure. When we mean red in specie, maybe a red apple comes to mind intuitively, but we're not meaning this specific red of this specific apple.
We mean redness itself.
Yes, we are meaning the single identical red, which, in a novel conscious manner, becomes our universal object. It's the essence of redness, distinct from any particular manifestation. This act of meaning is founded on seeing individual red things, but it constitutes the intuitive presence of the idea of red itself as a universal.
And this leads to a fundamental difference.
Yes, between individual singulars, specific things like this red house, or Socrates and specific singulars like numbers in math, or concepts and propositions in pure logic. The number 2 is a specific singular, an ideal unity, not just two apples.
Triangularity, not just a drawing of a triangle.
Exactly. Our semantic intention often targets these specific singulars directly.
Why does this distinction matter so much? It seems like he's pushing back against traditions that tried to explain universals away, reduce them to experiences or words.
It matters precisely because, Husserl argues, we cannot avoid talk about universal objects in science, math, rigorous thought. Semantic analysis shows our direct, true intention is plainly not directed upon individual objects when we use universal terms.
Like 2 is an even number.
Exactly. That's a specifically singular judgment. It's about the universal concepts 2, an even number, not two apples or two examples of evenness. That's profoundly different from an individually singular judgment like Socrates is a man.
So denying these universals undermines knowledge itself.
It undermines the very possibility of mathematics, pure logic, any stable general knowledge.
Which brings us right to his critique of those traditions. He goes after modern theories of abstraction, especially empiricist ones, right? The ones reducing universals to psychology or experiences. Can you walk us through his rebuttals of Locke, Berkeley, Hume?
Absolutely. He systematically dismantles these empiricist views, showing how they fail to grasp the ideal nature of universals, mistaking them for something psychological or concrete.
Let's start with Locke.
His critique of John Locke is quite detailed. Locke gets criticized for psychological hypostatization of the universal. Locke thought a general idea was formed by abstracting common qualities, leaving particulars out, creating a sort of blurry mental image.
And Husserl's problems with that.
Husserl argued Locke confused presentation with what is as such presented. He confused an intuitive presentation, like a mental image, with a significant reference, meaning, and he made the universal a real datum in consciousness, like a general idea was a separate mental picture.
But universals aren't mental pictures.
No. Husserl's counter is that the inseparability of the universal, its incapacity for being made real, holds a priori. It is rooted in the essence of the genus as such. Think about justice. The thought of justice in your head is a real mental event. But the concept of justice itself, its ideal meaning, isn't just that fleeting thought. It's an objective conceptual unity. Geometry proves things about every triangle, not just triangles in reality or in idea. An ideal triangle is still ideal, not a psychological particular. Locke missed that mental existence is also real existence, but ideal being is something else, a conceptual unity intended by minds, not a mental object.
Okay. What about Berkeley? He attacked Locke's abstract ideas.
He did. Berkeley argued all ideas are particular and we use one particular idea to represent others. But Husserl argued Berkeley still fell into similar traps. Berkeley, Husserl said, confuses the basis of abstraction with what is abstracted, treating the concrete instance with the object our thought intends.
The famous example being the triangle on the blackboard.
Exactly. Berkeley argued a geometrician demonstrates properties using the triangle drawn in ink on the paper or in chalk on the blackboard. That drawing represents all triangles.
And Husserl's counter.
No geometrical proposition holds for the drawn figure as a physical object, since the latter is not really rectilinear nor a geometrical figure at all. The lines are imperfect, they have width. The mathematician refers to a rectilinear figure as such, a general application grasped in a single act of thought. The drawing is just an aid, a stepping stone, not the object of the proof. The object is the ideal triangle.
Not the smudge on the board. And Hume.
Finally, Hume. He praised Berkeley but extended the flawed approach. Hume stayed attached to representation and associative connections. He thought general ideas were just particular ones linked to a term that makes them recall similar individuals, reducing universals to psychological association.
So the core problem with all of them.
The deeper problem with all these empiricist theories, including nominalism, is their defective descriptive analysis. They are blind to the fact that the forms of logic are no more than these forms of significant intention, which have themselves been made objects of a consciousness which treats them as unities, and so turns them into ideal species.
They mistake the act of abstracting for the species that is abstracted.
Precisely. They mistake the psychological process for the logical content. They lacked the conceptual tools to see the distinct mode of consciousness that grasps universals as ideal unities.
That's incredibly clear. So if empiricist accounts fail, how do we genuinely become conscious of universals, these ideal species? How do we get beyond individuals to the universal? What's that experience like?
Husserl insists on the irreducible peculiarities of the forms of consciousness, the act characters. The consciousness of universality is a peculiar consciousness. It gives evidence to general names and meanings.
Not an image, not an association.
No, it's an indwelling meaning form that's immediately given to us, as is the nature of color and sound. This act character is a mode of meaning, a distinct way of intending an object. It lets us apprehend a species as a universal object, not just an individual instance.
So seeing a red apple, you don't mentally erase its shape to get redness.
No. Rather, in perceiving the red apple, you can perform a distinct, reflective act of consciousness that intends redness as such, as a universal quality, a species. You focus on the what of redness, not just this instance of it.
A genuine, intuitive grasping of the universal itself.
That's how Husserl describes it. Not just grasping its signs or instances. We become aware of the universal by performing a distinct act of consciousness that intends it as a unity. It's a fundamental capacity of consciousness.
Let's transition now to another crucial aspect. The structures of consciousness and the nature of judgment. Phenomenology, intentionality, these are key. He draws from Brentano but critiques him. How does Husserl redefine consciousness and intentionality?
Right. The fifth investigation, intentional experiences and their contents, tackles ambiguities in Brentano's work. Brentano famously revived intentionality, the aboutness of consciousness. All conscious acts are of something, thinking of, desiring something. A huge insight, then.
But Husserl saw problems.
He regarded Brentano's characterization as misleading and inadequate. Why? Because, for Husserl, Brentano was still somewhat stuck in a Cartesian dualism of subject and object, with all the issues of representationalism.
Like consciousness just has an internal picture of the object.
Sort of, yes. As if it merely represents an external object, rather than directly experiencing the object itself.
So Husserl refines this.
His refinement aims for a more precise account of what Brentano called presentation, framing it as an objectifying act. Consciousness isn't just about having presentations of things, but actively constituting them as objects for consciousness.
So the object reveals itself through experience.
Exactly. It's not just subject and object, but how the object is understood through various modes of conscious experience. This correlation between objectivity and subjectivity is the new world phenomenology explores. How objects come to be objects for consciousness achieve evident self-givenness within our experience.
So it's not just that we present things, but how?
Crucially, how? He differentiates many senses of the term presentation for Stelling, arguing logic must decide which meaning is most appropriate for its own needs. Moving beyond a simple notion of presentation to the various ways consciousness relates to and constitutes objects, sensuous, conceptual, ideal. This analysis grounds the objective validity of knowledge.
That's a crucial clarification. From representation to active constitution. So what's the cardinal problem of phenomenology Husserl is pursuing here? Where does this analysis of intentionality lead regarding knowledge?
It leads directly to the doctrine of judgment. For Husserl, this is the cardinal problem of phenomenology. It's where subjective conscious experience meets the objective validity of truth.
Where experience becomes validated knowledge.
Precisely. Moving from just having a thought to asserting something as true.
And this connects back to psychologism.
Directly. Full circle. Psychologism blurred the line between judgments as subjective experiences of judging, the mental act of affirming denying, a real event in your mind, and propositions as ideal meaning units.
The objective content.
Yes, the objective content of what's judged true or false independently of any particular act of judging. The earth is round, has an ideal truth value whether anyone thinks it or not.
So judgments in pure logic aren't just mental acts.
No. They are not constructed out of mental acts of presentation or belief. Instead, they ultimately point back to concepts. The necessary consequence in which the form of an inference consists is not an empirical psychological connection among judgments as experiences, but an ideal relation among possible statement meanings, among propositions.
So when a scientist deduces something,
They experience objective thinking, yes, but what they connect is an objective unity of meaning concepts and propositions with ideal relations. That ideal unity exists or subsists independently. Our subjective acts grasp these ideal relations. They don't create them.
this raises a profound question for us, doesn't it? How do we bridge our subjective experience of judging the mental act with the objective, ideal truth of a proposition which exists independently? This feels like the heart of epistemology, trying to shed light on the idea of knowledge, not explain it as a factual occurrence.
Exactly. Husserl constantly pushes us to see the ideal structures making knowledge possible, even as we acknowledge the subjective acts through which we grasp them.
After all these intricate details, Husserl brings us back to the grand vision, the idea of pure logic. How does this connect to the unity of science? Not just individual truths, but the fabric holding knowledge together.
For Husserl, science isn't just a pile of psychological acts or cultural products. What makes science science is an objective or ideal interconnection. This gives acts unitary objective relevance and ideal validity. It's about systematic, rational coherence that transcends individual experience, making knowledge shareable and verifiable. That ideal structure distinguishes science from mere opinion.
And this unity is characterized
By deductive coherence. A systematic coherence in the theoretical sense, which means finding grounds for one's knowing and suitably combining and arranging the sequence of such groundings. Science isn't just facts, it's an organized body where propositions connect by ground and consequent, giving explanatory insight, like theorems building on axioms in math.
He also mentions nomological sciences.
Yes, the abstract or nomological sciences, law-seeking ones, are the genuine basic sciences. They deal with general laws, principles of explanation from a single legal base. Concrete sciences then derive all that theoretical element from them.
Like physics underpinning chemistry.
Exactly. These sciences uncover universal, exceptionless laws, providing the framework for empirical observations. This hierarchy gives science its explanatory power.
So pure logic isn't just another science, but something more fundamental, the conditions of the possibility of science in general, almost transcendental.
Precisely. Pure logic investigates the a priori conditions for any theory whatsoever. Laws whose foundation lies purely in the notion of theory. Or more specifically, in the notions of truth, a proposition of object, of property, of relation, etc.
Independent of specific content.
Yes, based on the fundamental categories constituting any theoretical knowledge, the invariant building blocks of thought.
And these categories are?
He identifies pure, formal, objective categories like object, state of affairs, unity, plurality, number, relation, connection, independent of particular material of knowledge applying universally. They are the essential constituents of any theory the forms, objects, propositions, relations must take for knowledge to be possible.
Discovered through phenomenology, not empiricism.
Yes. They reveal the fundamental scaffolding of all rational discourse.
This systematic nature is striking. He says these insights lead to laws and theories which have their grounds in these categories. What kinds of theories? It sounds like a meta-science.
Indeed, theories that are in themselves theories. Laws concerning meanings and objects as such, with the widest universality conceivable, the universality of logical categories, derive directly from these pure, formal categories. Not about what exists, but the forms of existence, relation, truth.
The examples.
On the meaning side, theories of inference, e.g. syllogistics. Though often seen as small, it's a systematic theory of valid reasoning. On the objective side, the pure theory of pluralities, from the concept of plurality, and the pure theory of numbers, from the concept of number, each an independently rounded-off theory system, purely formal.
Providing the ultimate framework.
Yes, the all-comprehensive fund from which each valid theory derives its ideal grounds of essential being appropriate to its form, the framework for any coherent knowledge system showing its formal validity.
So how does this grand vision manifest in actual scientific work? Is there a real-world example of this pure logic in action?
Husserl points to formal mathematics, or the pure theory of manifolds, as a partial realization of this ideal. Generalized algebra or geometry, studying abstract forms independent of content. The math of pure possibility.
What are its key characteristics?
Fascinating ones. It works out the form of the essential types of possible theories or fields of theory. Its objects remain quite indefinite as regards their matter, called thought objects by mathematicians.
Placeholders, like X or Y in algebra.
Exactly. Not specific numbers or points, but placeholders for anything that fits the specified connections. X could be a number, vector, function if it obeys the rules.
And they're determined solely by form.
Solely by the form of the connections attributed to them, not by individual nature or material species. In algebra, the form A plus B plus A, etc., hold. The manifold is defined by thought objects permitting these operations. The specific A or B doesn't matter, only the formal relationships and rules. That's how generalized algebra applies to numbers, matrices, even logic.
The power of formalization seems immense here.
It is. This allows formal generalizations of our original thought trains, even our sciences. Out of arithmetic, generalized, formal arithmetic arises. Numbers become just chance objects of application, not basic concepts. This leads to the pure theory of manifolds, covering all possible deductive systems.
Finding the underlying structure of all deductive systems.
Yes, revealing the universal architecture of rational thought, regardless of domain, a blueprint for any consistent theory.
That's incredibly insightful. Reflecting on this, how does abstracting to such pure categorical forms help us understand seemingly disparate fields like math and logic, even everyday thought? What's the takeaway from this level of abstraction?
It helps profoundly. By abstracting, we see the unity of all rational knowledge. Beneath the diversity of math, physics, everyday reasoning, universal logical structures are at play, like finding the grammar underlying all languages.
So it allows for cross-disciplinary insights.
Yes, and developing universal methods for coherent theories. It also provides a critical lens to examine knowledge claims. Do they adhere to these a priori conditions? It deepens understanding by showing knowledge isn't just facts, but building coherent, ideally structured systems.
What a journey through Husserl's logical investigations. We've seen him fundamentally reorient philosophy, pulling logic from psychology, anchoring it in ideal laws, pure forms, a powerful argument for objective truth and reason.
A crucial antidote to relativism. Indeed, by meticulously distinguishing indication and expression, sorting out meaninglessness, syntactic jumble, objectlessness, a priori senselessness, and especially distinguishing individuals from ideal species, he gives us powerful tools for clearer thinking.
Challenging us to move beyond psychological prejudices.
And understand the true objective validity of knowledge, recognizing the distinct conscious acts through which we grasp universals as ideal unities, not just mental constructs.
We've unpacked how phenomenology here wasn't just descriptive psychology, but a radical inquiry into essential structures of pure experiences, the structures of sense, letting us grasp truth, exploring the deep correlation between objectivity and subjectivity.
Where meaning and knowledge are constituted through intentional acts, not just describing the mind, but understanding the ideal conditions making mental acts truly cognitive, objectively.
And envisioning pure logic as a theory of theories, clarifying a priori conditions for any theory through formal objective categories, and the pure theory of manifolds. It's a vision of clarity still resonating today.
Absolutely, showing that distinct sciences are underpinned by universal logical structures, making unified knowledge possible. A testament to rigorous conceptual analysis uncovering the forms of thought and the possibility of science.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? Next time you face a complex idea, contradictory statement, remember Husserl. Ask yourself, is this an indication pointing to a fact, smoke fire, or an expression conveying ideal meaning, justice?
Is it meaninglessness from jumbled terms, objectlessness, coherent concept, no referent like Golden Mountain, or actual senselessness, revealing logical contradiction, round square?
And crucially, are we discussing a psychological process, how someone happens to think, or an ideal logical form, a timeless structure dictating what must be for thought to be true or coherent? That distinction is paramount.
And perhaps this raises an important question for our modern world. In this age of information overload, where quick takes often replace deep analysis, how can Husserl's meticulous method returning to the things themselves, the pure forms, ideal unities, help us navigate complexity?
Help us avoid superficial thinking.
Yes. How do we cultivate the patience and precision to discern ideal structures amidst the noise of facts, biases, constant information flow? What would applying his rigor to today's data streams even look like?